Hey guys, tonight we're slipping quietly into the warm, soft darkness of ancient Babylon. You can almost feel it, the evening air thick with the scent of clay dust and river water, the faraway hum of chatter from the market still lingering in the breeze. The city is winding down, though not sleeping. Babylon never really sleeps. It hums, it sighs, and tonight you're walking slowly through its winding lanes to discover a world written not on glowing screens, but on cool slabs of earth.
So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love for you to post your location and local time in the comments too. It's always fascinating to see where in the world we're drifting off together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You start at the city gate, where the great ziggurat looms in the distance like a staircase carved for the gods themselves. The last rays of the sun slide down its terraces, painting everything in copper and gold. You move past stalls closing up for the day, spices being swept into sacks, goats protesting their bedtime, and a boy chasing the last chicken that refuses to cooperate. There's laughter somewhere, low and sleepy. Babylon is enormous, pulsing with life. It's said that nearly 200,000 people live here, from priests to potters, merchants to musicians. Some historians still argue whether it truly was the largest city of the ancient world. But standing here, watching the endless stream of humanity, you'd be forgiven for believing it. You pass a scribe's workshop, where oil lamps flicker against clay walls. Inside, a young apprentice is kneading a lump of damp river clay with his palms, smoothing it carefully. His teacher, an older man with weary eyes and a reed stylus tucked behind one ear, supervises quietly. The boy keeps glancing toward the doorway, maybe hoping to be dismissed soon. The teacher finally says something short, probably again. The boy sighs, and you can practically hear the unspoken thought. It's going to be a long night. Funny how little changes over time. You can imagine the same energy in a modern office at 8 p.m. on a Monday. Someone waiting to clock out, wondering if the boss will ever stop hovering. The air smells faintly of wet clay and lamp oil. You watch as the teacher demonstrates how to roll the clay into a neat rectangle. He presses the wedge-shaped tip of the stylus into it, slowly forming tiny impressions, rows of symbols that look both mathematical and poetic. It's cuneiform, the oldest known writing system. Each wedge mark holds sound, meaning, emotion. The apprentice's marks wobble slightly, but the teacher nods. Not bad. You edge closer, fascinated. In this world, writing isn't something everyone does. It's an art, a privilege, sometimes even a secret. To write means to control time, to record, remember, and send thoughts beyond the present moment. A clay tablet might last thousands of years longer than a papyrus scroll. Of course, it might also crack if someone sneezes on it the wrong way, but that's part of the charm. You probably won't survive this. Statistically speaking, most people in Babylon won't make it to 40. But your words? If you're lucky, they might outlive entire empires. There's comfort in that thought, strange as it sounds. Outside, the sky deepens into indigo. Torches flare to life along the street, and the reflection of firelight shimmers on the polished river stones beneath your feet. Somewhere, a flute plays a slow tune. You stop at the corner where two boys are trading messages. One holds a small rounded tablet wrapped in another layer of clay, a clay envelope. The other holds a bag of dried dates as payment. He squints, tilts its head, and asks, "It's not baked yet, right?" The first boy shakes his head. He doesn't want to deliver a tablet that cracks halfway across town. You watch them exchange, marveling at the simplicity and the trust. This is ancient Babylonian mail, Before parchment, before paper, before postal codes, just human words pressed into earth and carried by hand through the night. In the distance, you can see the Euphrates glinting under the moon. The river has carried traders, kings, and countless secrets. Somewhere upstream, farmers are still working by torchlight, coaxing water into their irrigation channels. The sound of frogs rises and falls like lazy applause. You wander on, past the smell of roasting barley and fish stew simmering in clay pots. A woman sweeps dust from her doorstep. Two men argue about the price of tin from the mountains. Ordinary life, utterly unhurried. You catch yourself thinking how different it feels from modern urgency. Here, a message might take hours to reach its friend across the river, and that's fine. Nobody expects instant replies. There's patience in this world, baked into its rhythm. One scribe, sitting cross-legged on a mat, is dictating aloud as he writes. "To my brother Shamash-Idin," he says in a careful tone, "may you live in health and joy. The barley shipment has arrived." The clay glistens as he presses each sign. He pauses, wipes sweat from his forehead, and blows gently on the tablet to dry the surface. It's almost tender, the way he treats it. You realize he's not writing for history. He's writing for connection. That's the funny thing about clay tablets. We often think of them as cold museum relics, but most were casual, friendly notes, receipts, love letters, reminders. The world's oldest to-do list, basically. Some tablets even contain scolding messages. You didn't repay the silver. You promised to visit. You can imagine Babylonian parents texting their kids, still waiting for that letter. There's a soft chuckle in that thought, a reminder that across 4,000 years, humans haven't changed much. As you drift farther down the lane, a temple bell tolls. The sound is low and resonant, like a heartbeat under the night sky. You glance up. Stars begin to show, faint at first, then brighter as torches die out. The constellations look slightly different, familiar yet older, their stories told in Akkadian rather than Latin. Somewhere, a priest will soon climb the ziggurat steps to record the stars' positions on a fresh clay tablet. Not for art, but for prophecy. Babylonian astronomy is a mix of science and superstition, and historians still argue whether they truly understood planetary motion or simply loved good patterns. You pause near a wall where someone has left an unfinished tablet out to dry. The marks shimmer faintly with moisture. You can almost read them. "My friend, I send this tablet with the wish that your household is well." The rest is smudged, the words dissolving into clay again, as if swallowed back by the earth. There's something poetic about that, how fragile and eternal a thought can be at the same time. A dog barks in the distance. You step aside as a pair of oxen pull a cart laden with baskets. The driver nods, too tired for words. The road feels warm under your feet, still holding the day's heat. You stop by the riverbank and watch the reflections ripple. Lamps bob on the surface from moored boats, each flicker marking a family's quiet end to the day. You take a deep breath, catching the scent of reeds, mud, and distant smoke. Tomorrow, letters will be written again. Friends will trade small jokes through clay. Merchants will share prices. Lovers will whisper affection through wedge-shaped signs. And centuries later, someone will dig those tablets from the dust, brushing them gently, reading their warmth through time. But for now, it's night in Babylon. The stars hang steady, the city exhales, and you stand there, listening to history settling around you like soft sand. You wake with the sound of doves rustling in the rafters. The morning in Babylon is slow, gold-tinted, and a little gritty with the taste of dust. Somewhere nearby, someone is already kneading fresh clay, and the rhythmic thump of it echoes faintly through the courtyard walls. The scent of damp earth mixes with baking bread and sun-warmed reeds. You stretch, blink against the brightness, and wander toward the scribe's workshop you passed last night, the one glowing with oil lamps and discipline. Inside, the same apprentice is there, though his eyes look even heavier this morning. His teacher hasn't changed either, except for a fresh smear of clay on his robe, and that eternal air of someone who has seen 1,000 sloppy wedge marks and survived them all. They don't look up when you step in. You move quietly, taking a spot near the door, the way you might in a modern cafe, except the smell here isn't espresso, it's river mud. "The clay must remember your hands," he says. The apprentice frowns, trying to interpret that sort of mystical nonsense, but obediently begins again, pressing, folding, pressing again. It's hypnotic to watch. The clay begins as something coarse and uneven, full of tiny pebbles. Slowly, with water from the Euphrates and steady pressure, it turns pliant and smooth. You can almost feel its coolness if you imagine your fingertips dipping in. There's something beautiful about it, really. Every letter, every message, every plea to the gods begins here, in mud. You realize that in Babylon, language is born not from ink, not from quill, but from earth itself. Historians still argue whether writing first emerged purely for trade, keeping track of barley and sheep, or whether there was always something deeper, a hunger to record emotion, memory, or gossip. You decide it was probably both. People might invent writing for taxes, but they keep it alive for love and complaints. The apprentice rolls the clay into a small tablet, about the size of your hand. The teacher hands him a stylus, a slender reed, its tip sliced diagonally. The tool looks simple, but it's a marvel of design. By pressing its edge into the clay, it creates the small wedge-shaped marks known as cuneiform. The direction and depth of each wedge determines sound and meaning, almost like a code. You lean closer. The apprentice begins marking lines in neat horizontal rows. The symbols are geometric and strangely soothing, like tidy footprints in wet sand. His strokes are uneven, though, one wedge too deep, another too shallow. The teacher clears his throat. The boy mutters something that you don't need to translate. You can feel the emotion. Again? There's a quiet humor in that moment. You can almost imagine every generation of student ever, across history, sighing at correction. Some things really don't evolve. The teacher takes the stylus and demonstrates again, this time slower, his movements almost meditative. He says, "Each sign is a promise. The clay remembers forever." You think about that. He's not exaggerating. Modern archaeologists still unearth tablets like these, sometimes perfectly legible after 4,000 years. Meanwhile, your last 3 text messages probably already vanished into the digital void. You glance at the small stack of finished tablets drying on the shelf. Each one contains a fragment of someone's world, lists of figs, hymns to Ishtar, or perhaps a friend's casual hello. The surfaces glisten faintly, waiting to be baked. Outside, the sun climbs higher and the noise of the city swells. The street fills with traders calling out prices, the clop of donkey hooves, and the rustle of baskets brushing past each other. You step out for air, the brightness momentarily blinding. Across the street, a potter's workshop mirrors the scribe's rhythm, hands shaping, spinning, smoothing. Different crafts, same devotion. You spot a man carrying a basket of clay lumps from the river. His tunic is streaked with gray, and his bare feet leave wet prints on the ground. He hums under his breath, a tune older than anyone remembers. You follow him back toward the riverbank where others work, their backs bent, scooping river silt into wooden molds. Children stomp barefoot through puddles, laughing as the mud splashes up their legs. It's easy to forget this is the foundation of civilization, literally. The same material used for letters also becomes bricks, homes, temples. The entire city is, in a sense, made of words. You smile at the thought. Babylon, a city built from conversation. You crouch beside one of the workers. He pats a lump of clay with practiced ease and grins at you, motioning for you to try. You hesitate, then plunge your hands in. The texture is silky, yet grainy, like dough mixed with sand. You roll it between your palms, trying to mimic his technique. He laughs at your clumsy attempt, but nods approvingly anyway. "Good clay," he says in a thick accent. "Strong river." He's right. The Euphrates provides everything here: water, trade, and this fine silt perfect for writing. Without the river, there would be no tablets, no stories, no history. Just silence and dust. Nearby, a woman sits by a basket of reeds, trimming them into styluses. She works fast, slicing each with a sharp obsidian blade, testing the edge by pressing it lightly into her thumb. The process looks dangerous, but she's practiced. Every so often, she wipes her blade on her sleeve, hums a tune, and goes back to trimming. You realize that somewhere in this rhythm of cutting, shaping, and pressing, the heartbeat of a civilization pulses. A curious thought drifts in, one of those soft, late-afternoon reflections. In your world, words are weightless. They float in the air, in data clouds, in invisible waves. But here, words weigh something. They have density, temperature, fragility. If you drop one, it might literally shatter. There's a humility in that. Maybe it made people choose their words more carefully. You carry a small tablet in your hands now, the clay still cool. On its surface are the faint beginnings of signs, just practice marks, nothing more. But to you, it feels alive, like holding a heartbeat. The apprentice and his teacher step outside for a break, wiping sweat from their faces. The teacher stretches his back with a groan and says something that makes the boy grin, probably a light-hearted jab about clumsy handwriting. They sit together on the doorstep, sharing a small loaf of bread. You sit nearby, content to listen. The teacher tears the bread and dips it in a bowl of date syrup. He looks up at the bright sky and murmurs something about rain. The apprentice shrugs, unconcerned. The air feels heavy with the promise of afternoon heat. Then, almost without thinking, the teacher picks up a scrap of clay and begins doodling, tiny animal shapes, birds, and a crooked fish. The boy laughs. So do you. It's such a small, human moment. Art born from boredom, not necessity. You're reminded that not every mark on clay was meant for eternity. Some were just for amusement, little sketches to fill the waiting hours. And yet, centuries later, archaeologists have found exactly that. Tablets covered in doodles and nonsense phrases. One even contains what might be the world's oldest meme. "You are not my friend," followed by a frowning face. Proof that sarcasm survived the Bronze Age. A breeze stirs the dust. The city hums around you. The splash of oars on the river, the chatter of the marketplace, the distant chant from a temple. Somewhere, a rooster crows, hopelessly late. You close your eyes, listening. You think about how this very clay under your palms holds memory. You press your thumb into it lightly, leaving a shallow dent, a signature of sorts. Maybe someone, thousands of years from now, will find this and wonder about you, just as you wonder about them. The teacher rises at last, brushing off his robe. The apprentice groans softly but follows. They carry their tablets to a shaded alcove to dry before baking. You follow at a respectful distance, feeling as if you've witnessed the quiet birth of something profound. Each word, each stroke, each wedge in this city carries more than information. It carries patience, care, and the texture of life itself. Writing here isn't fast or casual. It's deliberate, slow, and grounding. like breathing in rhythm with the earth. You glance back toward the river one last time. The light dances on its surface, dazzling. The clay glows where the sun touches it. For a moment, you realize that everything, the land, the people, the stories, is connected by that simple element. Earth shaped by hands and made to speak. By midday, the city is humming like a beehive pressed under the sun. Heat waves ripple above the mudbrick rooftops, and the air feels thick enough to drink. You find shade beneath a narrow awning near the scribe's workshop, watching the quiet miracle of delivery unfold. Babylon's ancient postal system at work. It's not glamorous, and definitely not fast, but it's efficient in its own sleepy, dusty way. Two young couriers, barefoot, sunburned, and looking like they've been running errands since birth, stand beside a small cart. On it rests a wicker tray holding a neat stack of small, oval-shaped clay tablets. Some are still damp, others baked hard in a shared kiln. Each one is a message waiting to travel. Gossip, trade agreements, love notes, maybe even a polite complaint about a neighbor's goat. The older courier flips through them with the ease of a modern mail sorter, scanning the symbols carved on the outer envelopes. These aren't letters in paper envelopes, of course. Each message is wrapped in a thin layer of clay, carefully sealed while still wet. When you crack it open later, you can see both the outer and inner texts, like an ancient version of Mark is Red. Some tablets even have tiny rope loops molded into the corners so they can be tied together in bundles. You step closer, and the younger courier looks up, squinting through the sunlight. He grins and says something teasing in Akkadian, something like, "Want to help carry a few, stranger?" You shrug as if to say, "Why not?" and he laughs, handing you one. It's surprisingly heavy for its size, cool, dense, and solid. The surface feels faintly rough beneath your fingers, and you can make out the faint wedge shapes pressed into it. Someone's thoughts frozen mid-sentence. This tablet you're holding was once just mud, shaped by a person with a specific mood that day. Tired, hopeful, distracted. Now it's a message about to travel across the city, carried by sweaty human legs. Forget same-day shipping, this is same moon delivery. You follow the boys as they start walking, balancing their baskets on their hips. The streets are a maze of alleys and courtyards, and the smell changes with every corner. Fresh bread, hot tar, river fish, incense, manure. You wrinkle your nose but keep pace. The boys move fast, darting through crowds with practiced agility. They weave past donkeys and water carriers, shouting greetings to familiar faces. Everyone seems to know everyone here. Halfway down the street, they stop at a small courtyard shaded by date palms. A woman with bright eyes and ink-stained fingertips waves from the doorway. "Any word from my brother and Sipper?" she calls. The older courier nods, rummages through the basket, and hands her a sealed tablet wrapped in a reed mat. She presses her seal, a carved bead on a string, into the soft clay envelope before taking it, marking the transaction complete. You watch the exchange with quiet fascination. No stamps, no receipts, no signature lines. Just trust, clay, and thumbprints. The woman thanks the boys, slips them a few copper coins, and disappears back into the cool interior of her home. You catch a glimpse of shelves lined with more tablets, her own archive perhaps. It's like a bookshelf, only made of stone instead of paper. As you continue, the older courier points out the workshop of a potter who sometimes doubles as a messenger for longer routes. He laughs and says something about how potters make the worst couriers. They're always baking your messages along with the bowls. Apparently, that's not a joke. Archaeologists have indeed found letters accidentally fired into pottery kilns. Some were preserved perfectly because of it. A lucky mishap, really. Historians still argue, the courier adds with a grin, whether that was accident or genius. You can't tell if he's joking, but it's a fair question. Maybe the line between mistake and innovation has always been thin. You cross a narrow bridge where the smell of the Euphrates rises thick and warm. Below, fishermen pull nets from the water, their voices echoing across the river. On the far bank, date palms sway gently, their reflections bending in the current. The couriers pause to rest, dipping their hands into the water and splashing their faces. You crouch beside them, watching the ripples distort your reflection. It feels surreal. You, a visitor from the future, sitting beside two ancient postmen, sharing a moment of peace. The younger courier breaks a piece of flatbread and offers you some. You take it, nodding thanks. It's dry but satisfying, tasting faintly of sesame and ash. He tells you, between bites, that he's been delivering tablets since he was 10. It's good work, he says, if the dogs don't chase you. You laugh softly. That sounds universal enough. He shows you a tablet marked with a small symbol shaped like a bird, his personal sign for speed. If someone trusts you, he says, they'll ask for you by your mark. You think of couriers today wearing uniforms, logos, barcodes. Here, it's just a boy with a bird mark and a good memory. Somehow, that feels more honest. As you climb back into the city's upper quarter, the narrow streets open into a wide plaza filled with sunlight. A statue of a lion guards the center, its mouth chipped but still fierce. Around it, scribes sit cross-legged, copying letters for those who cannot write. You hear one dictating for an older man, a note to his son serving in the army far away. His voice trembles a little. "Tell him," he says, "his mother misses his singing." The scribe presses each sign slowly, carefully. You stand there for a long moment, listening to the rhythm of styluses tapping clay. It's strangely soothing, like rain on a roof. There's a tenderness to it, even in the bustle of the marketplace. A small commotion breaks your trance. The older courier mutters a curse under his breath. One of the younger boys has tripped, sending a tablet tumbling into the dust. The clay doesn't shatter, it was only half dried, but the wedge marks smear beyond recognition. The boy looks horrified. His friend shrugs. "It happens," he says gently. "Write again." You crouch beside the tablet, tracing the ruined impressions. It's oddly tragic, watching words disappear like that. But it's also oddly poetic. Not every message survives, and maybe that's okay. The world is full of things meant only to be said once. A bell tolls from the temple district, signaling afternoon prayers. The couriers gather their baskets and prepare to finish their route. You follow them through the crowd one last time, passing merchants arguing over prices and children chasing each other with reeds. The air smells of roasted chickpeas now. The day feels heavy but calm, the kind of heat that slows everyone's heartbeat just enough to keep the peace. At the final stop, the couriers deliver a tablet to a merchant's house, a tall man in linen robes with gold rings on every finger. He eyes the tablet, nods approvingly, and drops a few silver pieces into the older boy's hand. "Come back tomorrow," he says. "I'll have replies ready." When the boys turn to leave, you notice a pile of discarded clay on the side of the house, broken tablets, shattered beyond use. They lie there like fossilized thoughts, fragments of forgotten chatter. One piece still bears a single wedge, clean and sharp, like the last heartbeat of a sentence. You pick it up and turn it over in your palm. It's just clay, but it feels heavier than it should, like memory itself. You set it gently back down. Some things don't need rescuing. The couriers head off toward the river again, their baskets lighter now. You follow a few steps behind until they vanish into the crowd, blending into the pulse of the city. Around you, Babylon carries on, voices rising and falling, wheels creaking, doves fluttering above the rooftops. You stand still in the middle of it all, the faint hum of life echoing around you. Somewhere, a new message is being pressed into clay. Somewhere else, an old one is breaking apart in the dust. Between them lies everything human, the desire to speak, to connect, to be remembered. And you, just for this moment, are part of that endless conversation carried on through time. The afternoon stretches long and heavy, the kind of heat that seems to press down even on the air. You drift away from the riverside, following a narrow street lined with half-open doors and lazy voices. Somewhere a pot clinks, somewhere else a child giggles. The scent of wet clay and cooked lentils mixes with the faint tang of bitumen, sticky and familiar, the smell of Babylon's walls themselves. You duck beneath a low archway into a shaded courtyard. Here, two merchants sit cross-legged beside a table cluttered with ledgers, baskets of grain samples, and one freshly baked clay tablet cooling in the sun. One of them, a bearded man with silver threaded through his hair, gestures animatedly with his stylus, while the other leans back with the tolerant patience of a friend who's heard this story before. You linger by the edge of the courtyard as the bearded man, Nabu Eresh, as you soon learn, starts dictating his letter. His companion, a younger scribe named Beli Lamasi, listens with the resigned expression of someone who knows this correspondence will run long.
"Write this," Nabu Eresh says, leaning forward, "to my esteemed friend Lugal Zeri, in the quarter near the Ishtar Gate. May Shamash grant you light and strength. May your household thrive, though I suspect your wife still burns your lentils." The scribe stifles a grin, stylus already tapping away in steady rhythm. The wedges appear line by line, neat and deliberate. Nabu Eresh continues, his voice smooth and confident. "Tell him that I received his last letter with gratitude. The shipment of barley he sent was of excellent quality, though the measure seemed a little poetic." He pauses, clearly pleased with himself. "You know," he adds to you, "my friend always rounds up when it comes to bushels. A poet, that one."
You chuckle softly. In the corner, a servant pours cool water from a clay jug into shallow cups. The scribe pauses to sip, then resumes writing, his reed stylus whispering across the soft tablet. You realize how intimate this feels, watching a friendship unfold not through spoken words, but through shaped clay, carried hand to hand across the city. The scribe asks, "Shall I add the prices?" Yes, of course," Nabu Eresh replies. "Right. The current price of sesame oil has risen again, and the merchants at the river wharf swear by Marduk it will rise higher still." He sighs theatrically, then grins. "Add. Still, I managed to secure a fair deal for our next shipment, thanks to my sharp tongue and your good name." The scribe smirks. "Flattery in both directions. Wise strategy." Nabu Eresh winks. "Always." As the scribe continues, you catch snippets of the letter. Notes about a stubborn donkey that refused to cross the ferry. A joke about an unlucky trader whose sandal broke during a temple procession. And a short complaint about the mosquitoes that rise from the canals at dusk. You can almost hear the rhythm of friendship in these lines, equal parts business, banter, and affection. This is not the lofty language of kings or priests. It's the voice of people who know each other's tempers, who tease and care in equal measure. A mainstream historical fact slips quietly through the scene. Babylonian merchants were among the first to use formal contracts and written receipts for trade, ensuring fairness across distance and time. In a way, these casual letters sit right beside history's first bureaucracy. But instead of cold record-keeping, you're witnessing warmth, commerce spiced with friendship. The scribe finishes the main text and glances up. "Do you want to close with a blessing?" Nabu Eresh strokes his beard thoughtfully. Right. May Nabu, the Lord of Wisdom, guide your words as you guide your scales." He chuckles at his own cleverness. As the scribe sets down his stylus, Nabu Eresh leans back, stretching his legs. "That will do," he says, satisfied. "Lugal-Zeri will laugh when he reads this. He's always saying I take business too seriously." The scribe carefully lifts the tablet by its edges, blowing on it gently to dry the surface. The wedges glisten faintly in the light. He places it on a small board, then begins to prepare a thin layer of fresh clay for the envelope. "We'll seal it when it's dry," he murmurs. You notice, off to the side, a small pile of older tablets stacked neatly. Each one is tagged with a little lump of clay marked by a personal seal. A cylinder rolled across the surface, leaving tiny images of gods, animals, and abstract patterns. Nabu Eresh's own seal bears a lion walking beneath the stars. You imagine the satisfying moment when it rolls across the soft clay, leaving that permanent trace of ownership and pride. Historians still argue, the scribe says absently, whether these seals began as art or security. He shrugs. Maybe both. We like beautiful locks. The servant laughs, setting down another jug of water. Or maybe you scribes just like excuses to make things complicated. The scribe grins. If we didn't, there'd be no history left for anyone to read. Outside, the sounds of the city shift as evening approaches. The cries of vendors fade, replaced by the slow rhythm of footsteps and quiet conversation. The light softens, turning everything honey gold. Nabu Eresh takes his freshly sealed tablet and holds it up to the light, admiring it like a proud craftsman. "Funny thing," he says quietly, almost to himself. "These little lumps of clay, they outlast us all. My grandfather's words were found in the temple archives. I touched his handwriting." You glance at the tablet in his hands and feel a strange echo of that same thought. Words that can survive centuries. What a comforting sort of immortality. He notices your expression and smiles. You think about that too, don't you? That maybe one day someone will find this letter and read it again. They'll think, here were two friends in Babylon, sharing a joke about lentils. You nod. It's oddly moving. Somewhere deep down, you realize you've just stepped into a timeless pattern. Humans reaching out, hoping someone, somewhere, will understand them. Nabu Eresh rises, clapping the scribe on the shoulder. "Thank you, Balilamasi. As always, you've made me sound cleverer than I am." The scribe laughs softly. "That's half my profession." The two men part with a handshake, firm, warm, unhurried. Nabu Eresh places the still damp tablet on a small reed tray and hands it to a waiting boy outside the gate. The boy bows slightly, tucks it carefully into a sling pouch, and trots off down the alleyway toward the messenger station. You follow for a moment, watching as the boy disappears into the fading light. Somewhere beyond the rooftops, the first evening star glows faintly. You return to the courtyard, where the scribe has begun cleaning his stylus with a small piece of cloth. The smell of cooling clay lingers in the air, mingling with the faint sweetness of dates roasting somewhere nearby. He looks up at you and smiles. "You see now? Letters are our city's heartbeat. Each one carries not just words, but people, their tempers, their laughter, their worries. Without them, Babylon would be silent." You nod slowly. The thought settles over you like dusk itself, gentle and inevitable. The scribe glances toward the street. "Tomorrow I'll write again. Someone will come needing to send news to a brother, a friend, a love. It never ends, you know." You can hear the faint rumble of distant thunder, just a whisper of a storm somewhere upriver. The air tastes charged, metallic, like wet stone before the rain. The scribe seems to feel it too. He steps inside, stacking his tablets carefully beneath a linen cloth to protect them from moisture. You linger a while longer in the courtyard. The sky above Babylon is deep violet now, the stars sharp as stylus marks. You can almost imagine Nebu Eresh's friend across town receiving his message in a day or two, breaking open the clay envelope, smiling at the teasing line about lentils, shaking his head fondly. Friendship, carved into clay. It's ordinary, and it's everything. The night wind stirs the palm leaves overhead, rustling them like paper that hasn't been invented yet. You close your eyes, listening to the quiet rhythm of life continuing, a world still righting itself, one wedge at a time. The morning after the storm carries a clean hush, as though the whole city of Babylon has taken a deep breath and not yet exhaled. The streets glisten with puddles, reflecting bits of blue sky, and you wander through them, your sandals making soft splashes on the clay-packed road. The smell of rain still lingers, a wet earth perfume that always seems to wake the senses after a hot night. You pass by a small group of messengers gathered near the gatehouse, each with a satchel slung across the chest, waiting for assignments. These are the lifelines of correspondence, the unseen network of runners and couriers who carry the thoughts and worries of thousands. One boy, hardly older than 14, adjusts the strap of his satchel and eyes the horizon like it's a personal challenge. You remember the tablet Nebu Eresh sent yesterday. Maybe one of these messengers carried it, weaving through narrow streets and across bridges, dodging carts and wandering goats. There's a rhythm to their movements, almost like a pulse. Babylon hums on letters. You follow one messenger as he leaves the gate, tablet pouch tucked securely under his arm. He moves with the purposeful calm of someone who knows every shortcut between courtyards and alleys. Soon, he stops at a modest house with pale plastered walls, marked by a blue painted door, a rare bit of color in a world of dust and clay. He knocks once sharply. A woman answers. Her hair is wrapped in a simple linen cloth, and her expression is wary until she sees the seal impression on the envelope. Then warmth spreads over her face. "From Nebu Eresh?" she asks softly. The boy nods. She smiles, thanks him, and presses a small piece of bread into his hand before closing the door. You linger, as you do, unseen yet somehow part of this world. Inside, the woman breaks the envelope, chips away the dried clay, and unrolls the inner tablet with practiced care. Her name, you soon learn, is Taramu, a neighbor and close friend of Lugalzeri, the merchant who's supposed to receive this letter. But he's away on business for a few days, so she's agreed to collect his correspondence. She reads a few lines aloud to herself, chuckling at the jokes about lentils and rising sesame prices. "Same old Nebu Eresh," she murmurs, shaking her head affectionately. Never could resist a pun. The tablet catches the light, and for a moment you can see how the wedge marks create subtle shadows, like ripples across a pond. You realize how intimate this act is, touching the same clay someone else held, tracing the marks of their thoughts with your eyes. It's like shaking hands through time. She sets the tablet down and sighs, gazing out the small window toward the river. Historians still argue whether women in Babylon were as literate as men, you whisper in your head, but looking at Taramu, the debate feels almost unnecessary. Her fingers move over the signs with confidence. She doesn't just read, she inhabits the words. In fact, some surviving letters from the old Babylonian period, real ones found in dusty archives and temple ruins, were written by women to friends, family, or even business partners. Some complain about lazy husbands, some gossip about neighbors. One even scolds a relative for not writing back soon enough. Humanity, it seems, doesn't really change. Outside, the rainwater trickles along the street gutters, carrying bits of reed and tiny petals. Taramu steps into the courtyard and lays the letter gently on a flat stone to dry fully. She hums under her breath, a slow, winding melody that might be older than the city itself. You notice something else in her yard, a small clay shelf filled with other tablets, some covered with woven cloth, others wrapped in thin oil-soaked paper to keep them from cracking. She tends to them the way someone might tend to family portraits. She smiles softly at the collection. "Lugal Zeri keeps too many," she says, half to herself. "He can't bear to throw them out, says they're pieces of his life." And in a way, he's right. Each tablet is a snapshot, a day preserved in signs and lines. In a world before paper, before phones, even before ink, these were the most tangible fragments of memory. As you watch, Terumu sets aside the letter and begins preparing clay for her own message. She doesn't write often, but today she feels moved. Maybe it's the storm clearing her head, or maybe it's the reminder that words can cross distance when people cannot. She rolls a small lump of clay into a neat oval and begins pressing marks with a slender stylus. Her movements are slower than a professional scribe's, but deliberate. "To my sister, Shala, in Kish," she mutters, "may the gods protect your household, and may the well in your courtyard never run dry." She pauses, smiling at her own superstition, and continues, "I hope you have not yet forgotten how to make that fig syrup you promised to send me. My children still ask for it." You grin. There's something irresistibly human about how she slips from blessing to craving in a single sentence. A mainstream historical fact surfaces in your mind. Clay tablets weren't just for trade and government. They carried recipes, love letters, and household inventories. Entire libraries of everyday life, written one wedge at a time. As she finishes, Terumu leans back, examining her work. "Not bad," she murmurs. "Better than last time, at least." She laughs softly, a sound that bounces off the courtyard walls. "If the messenger can actually read my handwriting, I'll count that as divine intervention." She reaches for a small cylinder seal, carved with the image of a palm tree and a crescent moon, her family's emblem. With care, she rolls it across the still damp surface. The impression catches perfectly, and she smiles in quiet satisfaction. Then she adds a postscript, almost as an afterthought. "Tell mother that the fig tree has fruit again, and the neighbor's goat is still escaping." The scribe's art, you think, was never just about record-keeping. It was about preserving a moment, however ordinary, in a way that could outlast breath itself. As the clay dries, the sunlight grows brighter, breaking fully through the clouds. A golden glow spills over the courtyard. You can almost feel the warmth returning to the city. The steady hum of merchants reopening stalls, of water vendors calling down the lanes, of laughter carrying from balconies. Terumu carefully wraps her tablet in a thin reed mat and sets it beside the door. She will take it to the messenger later. For now, she sits beneath the shade of her fig tree and pours herself a small cup of watered beer. The quiet of the moment is broken only by a pigeon cooing from the roof. You watch her tilt her face up toward the sun and close her eyes, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. You wonder if she knows, really knows, that her words might last longer than her lifetime. Probably not. People rarely do. A fringe fact drifts through your thoughts. Archaeologists once found a cache of private letters buried beneath a collapsed house in southern Mesopotamia, untouched for nearly 4,000 years. One was from a woman to her sister, complaining about a neighbor's loud donkey. And somehow, even across all that time, it still reads like gossip whispered over tea. The simplicity of it all feels almost holy, like every letter ever written, no matter the medium or age, belongs to the same conversation humanity keeps having with itself. As the light shifts and the city resumes its rhythm, you rise, your invisible feet brushing through puddles. Somewhere across the quarter, a temple bell rings faintly. Another scribe begins his day. Another letter begins to take shape. And through it all, Babylon breathes, word by word,
clay by clay. By midday, the air above Babylon shimmers again with heat. The puddles left by last night's rain have already vanished, leaving behind faint, chalky outlines on the clay streets. You make your way toward the northern edge of the city, where the hum of daily life softens into the slow rhythm of work, the sort that shapes not only the city, but the centuries that follow it. Here lies one of Babylon's many scribe houses, tucked behind a modest courtyard shaded by a fig and a small tamarisk tree. You step through the narrow archway and into a space alive with quiet concentration. Young apprentices sit cross-legged on reed mats, each one hunched over a slab of clay, tongues poking from the corners of their mouths as they carve practice lines into the surface. The teacher, a wiry man named Shama-Ilu, paces between them with the steady patience of someone who has long surrendered to the slow pace of mastery. His stylus taps rhythmically against his palm, keeping time like a musician counting beats.
"Remember," he says, voice soft but firm, "you must listen to the clay. It tells you when to stop pressing. Too deep, and you make anger. Too shallow, and you make forgetfulness." You crouch beside one apprentice, a boy barely 12, whose clay tablet is covered in neat, repetitive lines. He's writing the same phrase again and again. A good scribe writes with quiet hands. The grooves are careful, deliberate, and a little wobbly. You can almost feel the focus radiating off him. Another student sighs dramatically. "Master," she complains, "my stylus sticks again." Shama-Ilu smiles. Then it is too dry. A scribe must know the difference between dry clay and dry thinking. You chuckle under your breath. The students groan, though a few smile too. Humor, it seems, survives any millennium. Shama-Ilu prances at the doorway and notices you standing there. "Ah," he says with mock severity, "another wandering mind seeking wisdom from mud?" You grin, something like that. He gestures for you to sit on a low bench. Then sit, watch, and remember. Every letter in Babylon began in a place like this. Not in temples, not in palaces, but in quiet rooms with tired children and stubborn clay. You glance around, watching as the students press wedges into tablets, each stroke forming the same small miracles of communication that once built empires. A mainstream historical fact drifts to mind, memorizing not only hundreds of cuneiform signs, but also the Sumerian and Akkadian languages used for writing. They were part linguists, part accountants, part historians, and sometimes part comedians, judging by the few surviving school tablets that include ancient jokes about lazy students and cranky teachers. You lean closer to watch a student practice numbers. Columns of marks rise and fall, tallies of grain, jars, and measures. This, Shama-Ilu says, is the language of trade. A scribe who counts well will never go hungry. The boy next to him mutters, "Unless his tablet breaks." The teacher snorts. Then he will simply write another. Clay is cheap, wisdom is not. The boy smiles sheepishly and gets back to work. Across the room, an older student sits apart from the group, carefully copying a letter onto a fresh tablet. You recognize the text. It's the one Nabu Eresh dictated yesterday, the playful letter to his friend Lugal-Zeri. The student glances up and catches your interest. "Practice from life," he explains. "We copy real letters to learn proper phrasing." He gestures to the lines he's written, the greetings, the jokes, even the blessing at the end. "It teaches tone," he says. "A letter should sound like its writer, not its scribe." You nod thoughtfully. There's something quietly profound in that. Even in a world where writing was a specialized art, voice still mattered. Every wedge carried not only meaning, but personality. Outside, the afternoon light filters through the tamarisk branches, dappling the floor in shifting patterns. The students pause to stretch, their hands cramped from hours of careful pressure. Clay dust coats their fingers, giving them the look of miniature sculptors. Shamailu claps his hands once. Enough practice for now. Let's read something that isn't a price list. He moves to a shelf near the wall and selects an older tablet, its surface smoothed and polished with age. He holds it up reverently, like a relic. "This," he says, "is a letter between two friends, older than I am, older than Babylon as we know it." He begins to read, his voice slow and even. "To my brother in Ur, may you live in peace. I have received your gift of fish, though I think they traveled longer than they should have. Still, I ate one to honor you and the gods, and lived to tell the tale." The students laugh. The teacher's eyes twinkle. See, even then, friendship carried jokes and trust through time. Letters are bridges that survive when everything else falls. He sets the tablet down gently. Historians still argue whether these early correspondences were truly personal or simply polite rituals, he muses. But I like to believe people meant what they wrote. I have seen too many smiles in too many letters to think otherwise. You glance again at the shelves lining the walls. Each tablet here represents hours of labor, but also an act of faith, that words matter enough to shape in clay. Some of these tablets are school exercises, some are contracts, and a few, just a few, are treasures of thought and feeling. A fringe fact flits into your mind. In certain schools, apprentices learn to write insults and jokes as part of their training. Scholars have found tablets filled with playful exchanges like, "You are slower than a drunk ox with 2 left feet." Apparently, even ancient education needed comic relief. One student pipes up, "Master, why do we still write on clay? The merchants say papyrus is lighter." Shama Illo chuckles. "Papyrus floats away on wind and water. Clay endures. Someday, when papyrus has turned to dust, someone will still read our words. You'll see." He glances at you knowingly, and for a second, it feels as though he's looking straight through time, straight at the listener drifting off somewhere in the modern world, thousands of years away. Besides, he adds, writing on clay reminds us of what we are made of: earth, water, and patience. You let that sink in. There's something deeply calming about it, the idea that creation can be both humble and eternal, that permanence comes not from grand gestures, but from quiet repetition. The afternoon wears on. One by one, the apprentices finish their final lines, smoothing the edges of their tablets and placing them on low racks to dry. The scent of warm clay fills the air, earthy and comforting. A breeze moves through the courtyard, lifting a few curls of dust. You close your eyes for a moment, listening to the scrape of stylus tips, the murmur of laughter, the whisper of ancient craftsmanship continuing unbroken. When you open them again, Shamayulu is standing by the doorway, gazing out toward the city's rooftops. "Someday," he says softly, "our students will write letters to friends who have never met us, and those friends will answer, and their words will travel farther than our feet ever could." He smiles faintly. "That is what clay is for, to give wings to what cannot fly." You nod slowly. You can almost imagine the web of words stretching across Babylon, connecting merchants, lovers, families, teachers, and dreamers. Each tablet a pulse in the heart of a living city. The teacher claps his hands again, waking the students from their days. "Enough dreaming for today. Go wash your hands. The world will still need writing tomorrow." They rise, laughing and stretching, their tablets safely drying on the racks. The sun outside begins to dip low, turning the courtyard golden. You step back toward the gate, feeling as though you've just witnessed something sacred. Simple, but sacred all the same. As you walk away, the sound of styluses fades behind you, replaced by the gentle murmur of the city winding toward evening. Somewhere, another tablet cools, another letter begins, and another friendship waits to be written into history. The sun drifts lower now, sliding toward the hazy horizon beyond the city walls. Babylon begins to glow with that strange, in-between light, the hour when day exhales and night slowly inhales. The streets stretch golden and empty as you make your way toward the heart of the city once again, where the grand avenues open like river channels between mud-brick walls. The smell of roasted onions and cooling bread wafts from the stalls as evening meals simmer in clay pots. You follow the slow shuffle of sandals and the soft chatter of neighbors until you reach a small courtyard home nestled between two narrow lanes. This is where Lugal-Zeri lives, the friend Nabu Eresh wrote to, the one who's been away for several days. You recognize the blue-painted door immediately. Taramu's careful hands had guarded his letter while he was gone. As you approach, the door creaks open. Lugal-Zeri steps inside, weary from travel, his robe powdered with the pale dust of the roads north of the city. He carries a leather pouch slung across his shoulder and looks like someone who's had too many negotiations and too little sleep. He's greeted by the soft laughter of Taramu's children, who peek from behind the doorway before scampering off to tell their mother. Taramu appears with a smile. "Welcome home," she says, "and before you ask, yes, a letter arrived for you." He brightens immediately, eyes alight with curiosity. "From Nabu Eresh?" "Who else?" she teases. "It's been drying in the courtyard since morning." She leads him to the low table near the fig tree where the tablet rests, its clay surface smooth and sun-baked. The seal of the lion beneath the stars gleams faintly under the waning light. He sits cross-legged, washes the dust from his hands in a small bowl of scented water, and lifts the tablet gently, turning it in his palms. His expression softens, the way one looks at an old friend before a word is even spoken. He chuckles quietly. "I can already feel the jokes waiting in here." You settle beside him as he begins to read, eyes moving across the ridges of the script. The letter unfolds in rhythm, familiar and teasing. Nabu Eresh's tone drifts between business and banter, the same warmth threaded through each wedge of clay. Lugal-Zeri shakes his head with a grin. "He still complains about my lentils after all these years?" Taramu laughs from across the courtyard. "He claims it's a public service to remind you." He snorts. "Public nuisance, more like." But the smile never fades from his face. You can sense the affection there, an easy, old friendship that has weathered trade disputes, floods, and probably a few hangovers. As he reads, you glimpse snippets of their partnership. A shipment delayed at the docks, a new merchant from Ashur trying to undercut prices, and the perpetual worry about barley yields along the river. Beneath it all runs that quiet faith that friends will help each other weather the unpredictability of markets and of life. A mainstream historical fact floats quietly through your thoughts. Babylonian trade relied on vast networks of merchants who recorded every exchange, every favor, every debt on clay. These weren't just transactions, they were lifelines of trust. Letters like this one kept far-flung relationships alive long before passports or postal stamps existed. Lugal-Zeri pauses halfway through the tablet and looks up, eyes thoughtful. "You know," he says to Taramu, "when we were younger, Nabu Eresh and I thought we'd both be rich by now. Instead, we just got better at writing long letters about not being rich." You can't help but smile. There's something comforting in that. Ambitions mellowed into friendship. Youth transformed into steady affection. He sets the letter down and leans back, gazing up through the fig branches. The first stars are winking into view, pale against the fading violet of the sky. "Still," he murmurs, "I'd rather have these words than all the silver in the temple vault." Taramu tilts her head.
even if they tease your cooking?
Especially then, he replies. It means he's still alive, still himself. I'd worry if a letter from Nabu Eresh didn't make me laugh. The evening air deepens, bringing with it the distant hum of the city settling into night. Oil lamps flicker to life in neighboring courtyards. Somewhere down the street, a musician plucks the first few lazy notes on a lyre, the sound drifting like smoke. Lugal-Ziri takes another sip of water, then retrieves a fresh lump of clay from a covered pot beside the wall. I suppose I should answer him before the next flood season arrives, he says, rolling it between his palms until it forms a perfect oval. Taramu fetches his stylus from a reed basket. Try not to start another pun war this time. He grins mischievously. No promises. You lean closer, watching as he begins to write. His hand is steady, confident, the hand of someone who spent half his life negotiating prices, reading contracts, signing receipts. But his words carry the warmth of friendship rather than commerce. Write this, he says softly, speaking the words as he presses them. To my brother Nabu Eresh, the lion who prowls the market stalls and chases discounts like gazelles. May the gods keep your household and your sense of humor. He pauses, chuckling. That will get his attention. Then, more seriously, your letter reached me safely, though my heart had already guessed your words. It seems friendship writes its own message long before the clay does. Taramu glances over, raising an eyebrow. Poetic? He shrugs. He'll accuse me of borrowing it from a temple hymn, but I mean it. He continues writing, updates about grain shipments, a note about a new potter who might undercut local prices, and a jest about how Babylon's mosquitoes now require their own trade tariff. The stylus moves with rhythmic ease. You can almost hear the sound of the wedge pressing, gentle, deliberate, soothing. When he finishes, he sits back and blows lightly across the surface, letting the clay dry just enough to harden without cracking. The tablet glows faintly in the lamplight. He murmurs, "Historians still argue whether our words matter once we're gone." He traces a line of cuneiform with his fingertip. But I think maybe they don't need to matter to everyone, just to someone. A fringe fact floats to mind, one that feels fitting here. In some archives excavated near Babylon, archaeologists found letters that had been kept and reread so many times that their edges were worn smooth by fingertips. Words literally softened by affection. You imagine Nabu Eresh's next grin when he receives this reply, the spark of recognition in his eyes as he reads familiar teasing lines written in a friend's hand. Across the years, across the dust and rivers, their friendship feels strangely modern, maybe even eternal. Lugal-Zeri rolls his family's cylinder seal, the one carved with a bull beneath a crescent moon, over the surface of the drying clay. The impression forms clean and certain, a signature in miniature. He smiles with quiet pride. Tomorrow, he says, I'll send it with the morning messenger. The roads will be dry again by then. Taramu nods, collecting the small tools from the table. And tonight you'll eat before you start talking about business again. He laughs. Yes, yes, food first, philosophy later. You watch them move inside, the glow of lamplight spilling over the doorway and painting the courtyard walls gold. The letter rests on the stone table, cooling in the warm night air. A gentle breeze rustles the fig leaves overhead, whispering like distant pages turning. The sounds of Babylon continue softly around you. The murmur of neighbors, the faint chorus of frogs near the canal, the rhythmic heartbeat of a city still alive in the spaces between its words. You look once more at the letter on the table, still damp, still fragile, and yet already eternal in its intent. A conversation between friends, captured in earth and breath. Tomorrow, another messenger will carry it through the streets,
across courtyards, past gates and markets, just as countless others have done before. And long after both men are gone, perhaps that small tablet will endure, buried beneath centuries of dust, waiting for curious hands to uncover it, to read their laughter, and to feel, even for a heartbeat, the warmth of friendship pressed into clay. The morning after Lugal-Zeri's letter is sealed, the city awakens slowly beneath a veil of cool mist. A faint scent of wet clay drifts from the streets, still damp from the night's dew. The first light of dawn paints the rooftops in a pale rose hue, and the hum of life begins anew. The lowing of oxen, the rattle of carts, the soft murmur of women grinding grain at their doorways. From within Lugal-Zeri's courtyard, a faint clatter of dishes echoes as Teramu prepares the morning meal. Steam curls from a pot of barley porridge, sweetened with dates and topped with a drizzle of honey. Beside her, their youngest child chases a stray chicken that's wandered too close to the hearth. Lugal-Zeri steps into the courtyard, rubbing the last traces of sleep from his eyes. His robe hangs loosely over one shoulder, and his hair, still damp from washing, glistens faintly in the light. He greets Teramu with a soft murmur and kneels beside the table where the letter now lies dry and firm. He turns it once more in his hand, inspecting the seal. "Perfect," he says quietly. "It's ready for the road." Teramu nods. "The messenger will be at the north gate soon. If you leave now, you'll catch him before the merchants crowd the road." He slips the tablet into a small reed pouch and ties it securely with fiber string. Then he tucks a small baked loaf of barley bread into his sash for the journey. A simple gesture, a reminder that even a short walk through Babylon deserves some nourishment. You follow him out into the awakening city. The streets are busier now. Artisans setting out their wares, donkey drivers shouting for space, and temple acolytes sweeping the thresholds clean. The smell of incense lingers faintly from the previous night's offerings, mingling with the scent of damp earth and baking bread. He walks slowly, greeting neighbors with nods and quiet words. Each face is familiar. The potter with his hands stained red from clay, the weaver spinning fine linen by the door, the old man who sells reeds for writing and carries a basket of fresh-cut stalks each morning. It strikes you how alive this city is, not in its grandeur alone, but in the rhythm of ordinary gestures, in the shared language of glances and small talk, of borrowed tools and offered bread. Babylon breathes not only through its temples and towers, but through these unseen threads of connection. At the corner near the canal, he passes a small shrine built into the wall, a simple niche holding a clay figurine of Nabu, the god of writing and wisdom. Lugal-Zeri pauses, touches his forehead, and murmurs a short prayer. The words are almost inaudible, but their intention feels deep and familiar. May my message travel safely. May my words find their way. He drops a pinch of barley into the offering bowl, then continues on. By the time he reaches the northern gate, the sun has climbed high enough to burn away the mist. A caravan is already assembling there. Donkeys laden with sacks of wool and copper, drivers calling to one another as they adjust ropes and loads. Dust rises in gentle plumes, and the air vibrates with quiet anticipation. The messenger stands apart, adjusting the strap of his satchel. He is young, his tunic patched but clean, and his eyes carry that mix of alertness and calm that comes from long days on the road. Lugal-Zeri greets him warmly and holds out the pouch. "For Sipar," he says, "deliver this to Nabu-Eresh, son of Rimut." The messenger nods, securing it carefully among the other letters wrapped in oiled cloth. It will reach him within 5 days, if the river road stays clear. Lugal-Zeri presses a few copper coins into his palm, payment and goodwill in equal measure. "And may you find water at every well," he adds. The messenger smiles, bows lightly, and mounts his donkey.
Within moments, the caravan begins to move, slowly at first, then with the steady rhythm of hooves and wheels rolling northward. You stand beside Lugal-Zeri as the dust of departure rises. He watches until the figures blur into the distance, until the last echo of their movement fades into the hum of the city. Then he exhales deeply, as though releasing something more than air. "It's strange," he says after a moment. "A letter feels heavier before you send it. Once it's gone, you start to miss it, as if part of you is still traveling with it." He turns to walk home, the morning already bright and warm. As he retraces his steps through the marketplace, his pace slows before a scribe's stall, a small wooden table shaded by a woven awning. The scribe, an older man with keen eyes and steady hands, is inscribing a contract onto fresh clay for a customer. Lugal-Zeri stops to watch for a moment. The stylus moves quickly, confidently, each stroke forming precise wedges that catch the light. Around the table, the sounds of the city blur into a low, rhythmic pulse. He lingers, then says quietly, almost to himself, "The gods may write on the stars, but we write on earth. Maybe that's how we stay part of both." The scribe glances up and smiles faintly. "And if the gods ever wish to remember something," he replies, "I imagine they do it in clay too." They share a brief laugh, the kind that passes easily between strangers who understand the same truth. Then Lugal-Zeri nods farewell and continues homeward. As the day wears on, the city grows louder, hammering from metalworkers' shops, the cries of vendors calling out prices, and the soft chant of apprentices reciting lessons in the school courtyard. Life continues effortlessly, as it always has. By midday, the heat presses down heavy and slow. The family gathers inside, beneath the cool shade of plastered walls. Taramu sits by the doorway, weaving a basket from palm fibers, while her daughter hums beside her. Lugal-Zeri rests near the water jar, sipping slowly from a clay cup. For a moment, everything feels still. The kind of stillness that doesn't mean silence, but rather a deep, living calm, the heartbeat of a home. Outside, a neighbor passes by, carrying a new tablet, its surface gleaming wetly in the sun. He calls in cheerfully, "More news from Uruk! A shipment of silver has arrived at the docks." Taramu laughs softly. "More letters, more promises." Lugal-Zeri nods, eyes half closed, and more stories to chase across the dust. You can feel the rhythm of this life, cycles of trade and talk, of writing and waiting. Babylon breathes in these patterns. Each letter written, each word sealed, becomes part of something greater, a quiet network of memory linking one home to another, one life to the next. Later, as the sun slides west again, the family walks together toward the riverbank. The air cools, and the shadows stretch long and soft across the streets. From here, the city looks endless, its ziggurat rising like a step between heaven and earth, its towers catching the final light. They sit on a stone wall overlooking the slow-moving water. Children laugh nearby, throwing pebbles that ripple across the surface. Traders pass with their donkeys, their silhouettes golden in the dusk. Taramu leans against her husband. "Do you ever think," she asks quietly, "how many words float through this city? How many voices we'll never hear again?" He smiles faintly. "Yes, but I think that's what makes them sacred. Even the ones that vanish, they were spoken once. That's enough." You sit with them in the fading light, the river whispering softly below. The sky above Babylon deepens into indigo, and the first stars return, faint but steady, like the faint glimmer of a seal pressed into clay, holding meaning far beyond its time. Somewhere out there, the messenger rides along the river road, the letter of friendship secure among his satchel of messages.
The wheels turn, the donkeys walk, and the great web of human connection continues to weave itself, word by word, road by road.
And perhaps, far in the future, when this world of clay and reeds lies buried beneath centuries of dust, someone will uncover that small tablet. They'll read the wedges, the jokes, the warmth, and realize that these ancient hearts once beat much like their own. Babylon in that moment will awaken again, not in stone or brick, but in the quiet miracle of remembered words. The next morning, Babylon hums with the low murmur of gossip that drifts through courtyards and across shaded markets. The sound is like bees in a summer field, soft, persistent, and impossible to escape. You feel it in the air before you even step outside. Something new has happened, or at least something new is being said to have happened. Lugal-Zeri sits at his table again, running his thumb along a small unmarked tablet, as if deciding whether it deserves words. He hasn't yet received a reply from Nabu-Eresh. Only 6 days have passed, but already the city feels restless. A tax decree has arrived from the royal palace, carried by officials wearing bright linen sashes that catch the sunlight in sharp gleams. Outside, 2 neighbors argue in hushed voices. They've raised the tariff on imported barley again, one says. 5 shekels per load. The other grunts. Next, they'll be charging us to breathe the dust. The sound of their irritation mingles with the clop of passing hooves, the hiss of water being poured into clay jars. You can almost sense the tension spreading like ripples from a dropped pebble. Taramu enters with a basket of freshly baked bread, the crusts golden and cracked. More taxes, she mutters. Even the gods will start complaining soon. Lugal-Zeri chuckles softly. If the gods pay taxes, perhaps we should send them a receipt on clay. You can't help but smile. This is the kind of humor Babylon thrives on. Soft sarcasm dressed as wisdom, the kind that slips into laughter because it's easier than frustration. Still, he picks up his stylus and begins pressing neat rows of wedges into the tablet. This letter will not be personal, not exactly. It's part message, part reflection, half a conversation with his friend in Sippar, half a way to make sense of a world that keeps shifting around him. You watch the words take shape. The king's men have passed through again. They say the treasury is hungry. We feed it grain and silence. Historians still argue. He pauses, looks up at the light filtering through the reed roof, and sighs. Historians still argue, you murmur in his voice, whether Babylon's taxes were a sign of its strength or its worry. He'd likely agree with the latter. Strength that must be constantly proven rarely feels like peace. He continues writing, describing the market's confusion, the merchants muttering, the temple scribes who spend half their day counting coins and the other half pretending not to. Each wedge stroke presses a little of that tension into clay, cooling it, containing it. Writing, after all, has always been Babylon's quiet form of resistance. Outside, the day grows warmer. The smell of freshly tarred boats drifts up from the river docks. You can almost taste the air, thick with bitumen, salt, and smoke from roasting grain. Down by the quays, a small group of traders from Mari argue over a shipment of tin, their voices rising, then settling into weary laughter. You trail Lugal-Zeri as he steps out into the sunlight. He's heading to the temple complex now, not to pray, but to deliver a portion of grain owed as temple tax. The path winds past rows of mudbrick homes, their walls carved with faint marks of fingers and reeds. Children chase each other through puddles left from last night's watering. A potter turns his wheels slowly, the soft thud of his foot echoing in rhythm. The temple stands ahead, massive and whitewashed, the ziggurat gleaming behind it. Priests move like shadows along the colonnade, their linen robes fluttering faintly. Inside, the coolness of stone and incense greets you like an exhale. The air smells of cedar, oil, and faintly burnt offerings. At the inner courtyard, Lugal-Zeri places his basket of grain among others, all neatly measured and tagged with small tokens bearing family marks. The clerk, a thin man with narrow eyes and the serene patience of someone who's seen every possible excuse, records the offering on a small clay docket.
"All accounted for," he says flatly. Then, after a moment, "But there are whispers, my friend. They say the governor wants more from the traders this season."
Lugal-Zeri tilts his head.
"More? From what we no longer have?"
The clerk shrugs with that same slow resignation found in every bureaucracy.
"When the river floods, they tax the mud for being too generous. When it dries, they tax the dust for laziness."
They share a weary laugh, though neither finds it entirely funny. On the way back, you notice the tone of the streets has shifted. More guarded glances, more quiet talk near doorways. Even the laughter of children sounds subdued, as if the city itself has grown cautious. Near the marketplace, an argument breaks out between two merchants over a shipment of dates. One claims to have paid the new levy, the other denies its existence. The crowd listens, half amused, half anxious, each person wondering how long before the next decree falls from the palace walls. Historians still argue, you whisper again, whether these small tensions marked Babylon's decline or simply its heartbeat. Perhaps both. Great cities, after all, don't crumble in a single day. They fade softly, like ink bleeding into old clay. That night, the courtyard is quiet, except for the chirp of insects and the low crackle of an oil lamp. Lugal-Zeri sits with his eldest son, showing him how to form wedges on a practice tablet. The boy's lines are uneven, but his concentration is fierce. "Letters can speak when you can't," his father tells him. "Even when you're gone, they whisper for you." The boy looks up. "Even to kings?" "Especially to kings," he answers, smiling. Nearby, Taramu hums as she brushes ash from the oven where the evening bread has cooled. The smell of roasted barley still lingers, a warm, earthy scent that clings to everything. You can almost imagine the air shimmering from the heat. She joins them and asks, "Will Nabu Eresh reply soon?" "Perhaps," Lugal-Zeri says, "but maybe silence is also a kind of letter, one that takes longer to read." The family sits together as the city quiets around them. From far off, a faint sound drifts through the night, the soft, rhythmic beating of drums from the palace courtyard, marking the changing of the watch. The notes are steady, echoing like a heartbeat beneath the stars. You glance up. The sky above Babylon is vast and endless, dotted with bright points of light. Somewhere beyond those constellations, the gods are said to write their own decrees, etched not in clay, but in fire. You can almost imagine them looking down, amused by the little scribbles humans make sense of their days. A cool breeze stirs, carrying the faint aroma of baked earth and oil. Lugal-Zeri leans back, his eyes half closed. "The city never sleeps," he murmurs. "It just listens." You think about that, the idea of a city listening, of how each letter, each whispered complaint, each offering becomes a kind of conversation between people and place, a dialogue that never truly ends. Tomorrow, another decree will come. Another scribe will inscribe new words onto clay, each one meant to last forever, and yet doomed to be forgotten. And still, the people will write. They will press their hopes, frustrations, and small kindnesses into the earth. Because that's what humans do. They answer power not with rebellion, but with memory. And memory, when baked, becomes harder than stone. By the time the oil lamp burns low, the air has cooled. The smell of baked bread mingles with the faint sweetness of date wine. You can hear the distant croak of frogs from the canals and the gentle creak of shutters closing for the night. Somewhere, on a road leading toward Sippar, a messenger rides beneath the stars, another letter tucked safely in his satchel, one of countless small voices traveling through the darkness. Lugal-Zeri watches the night sky for a long while before finally whispering, almost to the wind, "May our words outlive our worries." And in that quiet, you realize, perhaps they already have. The next morning opens gently, with the soft glow of dawn creeping across Babylon's rooftops. The streets are quiet now, save for the distant calls of merchants arranging their wares and the faint clatter of water jars being lifted from wells. The air carries a faint sweetness from nearby gardens, mingled with the earthy tang of drying mud and scattered straw. You wander through these familiar streets, tracing the worn paths that countless feet have pressed over centuries, the rhythm of the city settling softly into your senses. Lugal-Zeri rises early, moving to the courtyard before the rest of the household awakens. He carries a small clay tablet tucked under his arm, the reply for Nabu Eresh, now fully dry and sealed. The morning light glimmers off the smooth, sun-baked clay, casting long shadows that stretch toward the river. He pauses at the edge of the courtyard, watching the light flicker over the fig leaves, and breathes in the air. There's a quiet anticipation in the moment, a calm before the letter begins its journey. The messenger is already waiting at the gate, adjusting the straps of his satchel, eyes alert and bright. The sun glints off the metal clasp of the pouch holding previous letters. Lugal-Zeri greets him with a small bow and hands over the tablet carefully, the gesture deliberate, as though passing something more fragile than clay, a fragment of time itself. "Carry this safely," Lugal-Zeri says softly, "and may the river guide your path." The messenger nods, placing the tablet securely among the others, and mounts his donkey. He rides off along the sun-baked road, kicking up a soft cloud of dust that glitters like gold in the morning light. The sound fades quickly, leaving the city in a serene hush, broken only by the distant hammering of artisans and the occasional bray of a donkey. You follow Lugal-Zeri back toward his home, noting how life resumes effortlessly in the streets. A baker sweeps the courtyard in front of his stall, scattering fine white dust across the sun-warmed bricks. Children chase each other past doorways, laughing at invisible jokes. A woman bends over a water jar, murmuring prayers as she fills it. The ordinary rhythm of Babylon is restorative, almost hypnotic in its constancy. Inside the courtyard, Taramu is arranging freshly picked dates in a shallow clay bowl, their deep brown sheen catching the light. The aroma mingles with the scent of barley bread cooling on the low table. She hums softly, a tune that drifts lazily through the air like smoke. Lugal-Zeri settles nearby, his eyes half closed, and begins to reflect aloud. "It's strange," he says, almost to himself, "how letters carry both our anxieties and our joys. One line can make a friend laugh, another can ease a worry." He picks up a practice tablet left from the previous day, tracing the grooves of cuneiform with his fingers. Historians still argue whether these early letters were meant more for utility or affection, he muses. But I know they are both, and neither. You watch as he lifts a fresh lump of clay and begins shaping it into a new tablet, his movements slow and deliberate. Each line he inscribes carries a rhythm, a heartbeat. There's a faint smile on his face as he recalls the jokes Nabu Eresh included in his letter. A reference to lentils, a jest about rising sesame prices, even a quip about the city's cats escaping the rooftops.
The stylus presses into the clay with a soft scratching sound, the kind that echoes faintly in the cool air of the courtyard. He murmurs a line as he writes, almost as if speaking the words into being. Your humor crosses rivers faster than any messenger. It finds me even when roads are wet with rain or dusted with sun. Taramu glances up, smiling. You sound like a poet. Lugal-Zeri shrugs, still focused. Perhaps I am, or perhaps I am just responding in kind.
A small breeze moves through the courtyard, stirring the palm fibers of the basket and carrying the faint scent of the river. The sound of water dripping from a small jug onto the stone floor adds to the serene cadence, as if the city itself is marking the passage of time. You notice that even in these quiet moments, there is life all around. A neighbor's goat tugs insistently at the fig tree. A child drops a small toy into a puddle. The faint bray of a donkey rises from the distant street. Babylon is a symphony of small, deliberate sounds, all threading together to create a tapestry of ordinary beauty.
Lugal-Zeri pauses, holding the stylus above the clay. He considers the next line carefully, reflecting on what Nabu Eresh might enjoy reading. Perhaps, he murmurs, I should describe the market today. The new merchant from Mari with the tin shipment, the way the sun hits the rooftops just right, the smell of fresh bread drifting through the streets. He presses the stylus back into the clay, continuing to record the world around him, transforming fleeting moments into something that will endure. It strikes you as quietly miraculous. Every small detail of daily life captured in wedge marks that will outlast even the tallest ziggurat.
Outside, the sun climbs higher, warming the clay streets. A messenger from the southern quarter passes, bearing another set of tablets. Lugal-Zeri pauses to watch him, thinking of Nabu Eresh riding north, the letter tucked safely in his satchel. Somewhere along that road, friendship travels faster than any chariot, slower than any river current, and yet always arrives. He lifts his gaze toward the river, watching the faint shimmer of sunlight on water. One day, he says softly, someone will read these words long after we are gone. They will feel the jokes, the worries, the hopes, and in that we are immortal. Taramu joins him, her hands dusted with flour. Immortal in clay, she replies, a gentle laugh in her voice. The gods might appreciate it too. He nods, tracing another line on the tablet. A mainstream historical fact settles in your mind. Clay tablets, once baked or dried, could survive thousands of years, preserving ordinary thoughts, trade records, and intimate letters for centuries to come. It's remarkable how something so simple could carry such enduring weight. A fringe thought drifts by. Some archaeologists found letters where one friend repeatedly joked that the other's wife was hoarding onions, a dispute preserved for millennia. Even complaints could become timeless in clay. By midday, the tablet is complete, inscribed with stories of the streets, the market, and the gentle humor of friendship. Lugal-Zeri rolls his family seal across the soft surface, pressing it deep enough to leave a permanent impression. The act feels like a promise, a guarantee that his words are not fleeting, that they will survive even if he does not. He sets the tablet in a shallow basket, ready for the morning messenger to carry it north. Outside, the city pulses quietly. Children playing, merchants selling, water splashing from clay jars. The rhythm is endless, comforting, and profoundly human. For a brief moment, you close your eyes and imagine the message traveling, carried by hooves and hands, through dust and sun, past river crossings and narrow lanes. Somewhere ahead, Nabu Eresh will receive it, unseal it, and smile at the familiar teasing lines, just as Lugalzeri hoped. In that continuity, you sense something timeless, friendship pressed into clay, the ordinary elevated to immortality. Babylon hums quietly around you, a city alive in the spaces between letters, laughter, and the simple act of writing. By the time the sun begins its slow descent, the streets of Babylon are bathed in a golden warmth, softening the hard lines of mud-brick walls and glinting off puddles left from the morning's watering. The air carries the faint scent of roasted barley, mingling with the earthy aroma of drying clay, and somewhere nearby, a potter's wheel hums a steady rhythm beneath a young apprentice's careful hands. Lugalzeri stands at the edge of his courtyard, watching a small group of merchants settle accounts at a nearby stall. They argue quietly over the weight of dates and the price of oil, their voices carrying just enough to be absorbed into the city's constant low murmur. You feel it again, the pulse of Babylon, measured not in hours or decrees, but in the flow of ordinary life. The tablet for Nabu Eresh has gone with the morning messenger, riding north along the dusty roads, and now there is space for reflection. Lugalzeri traces a finger along the small grooves left by his stylus, the wedge marks holding the memory of his thoughts, his jokes, and his quiet worries. It is a strange comfort to him, the feeling that even if the messenger never returns, his words are somewhere, alive on clay. Taramu appears at the doorway, carrying a small bowl of water to cool the clay in the basket. The children follow, curious about the ritual, peeking over their mother's shoulder. Lugalzeri smiles faintly, bending to let his youngest run a finger over the tablet's edge. "Careful," he murmurs, "this is our voice traveling to a friend." The boy giggles. "Our voice, not yours alone?" "No," Lugalzeri replies, pressing a finger into the clay beside the boy's. "All our voices, yours, mine, mother's laughter, the sound of bread baking, everything we want him to feel." The morning stretches on in calm repetition. Lugalzeri decides to visit the scribe school, where Nabu Eresh once studied, curious to see how the younger apprentices are faring. The streets become narrower, and the chatter softens as you pass through lanes lined with mud-brick homes and small gardens. The scent of figs ripening in the sun drifts over walls, mingling with dust and straw. At the school, the low hum of learning is immediate. Young apprentices sit cross-legged on reed mats, their styluses scratching against wet clay. The head scribe, a tall man with a serene expression, notices Lugalzeri and beckons him over. "It's been some time," he says. "You come to see the progress of our students?" "Yes," Lugalzeri replies, watching the apprentices carefully, "and perhaps to remember my own early mistakes." The scribe smiles. "Then you will be pleased. Their letters grow more confident each day. They practice correspondence, the sort that may one day travel beyond our walls." You notice one boy, barely 10, carefully copying a letter from Nabu Eresh to his friend in Sippar. His stylus moves slowly, deliberately, forming wedges that carry the same teasing tone and quiet affection of the original. It is remarkable to watch the next generation preserving the voice of their elders. A mainstream historical fact drifts through your mind. Babylonian education often involved copying letters, hymns, and records, which trained young scribes not only in cuneiform, but also in the nuances of tone and etiquette. Even the smallest wedge could indicate humor, respect, or a gentle rebuke. The boy pauses, looks up, and notices you observing. He blushes faintly, then smiles shyly and continues. Lugalzeri leans close, murmuring encouragement. "Remember, the words carry your hand and your heart.
Write slowly, and the clay will speak for you. Outside, the city continues its soft, bustling rhythm. Women carry jugs of water back from the canal. Oxen plod along the streets laden with grain. And the distant clang of a smith's hammer marks time like a gentle metronome. You feel the harmony in the motion, the way work, life, and letters intertwine into a single, enduring beat.
Lugal Zeri stays for a while, offering guidance to the students, showing them how to press the stylus with just the right amount of pressure, how to make the wedges read as both letters and laughter. A fringe fact comes to mind. Some tablets from this period were found with erasures and corrections, showing that even centuries ago, writers knew the importance of revision. Scribal mistakes were forgiven only by time and patience. Eventually, he leaves the school, walking slowly back toward his home. The sun has moved westward, shadows stretching across the streets and reflecting the soft gold of late afternoon. He passes familiar neighbors, exchanging greetings and small jokes. A woman waves from her doorway, a basket balanced on her hip, and a child darts across the lane chasing a stray dog. At home, Taramu waits with tea brewed from dates and herbs, the warm aroma curling through the courtyard. The children are gathered around, restless but attentive, eager to hear a story or a joke. Lugal Zeri places the tablet he observed earlier on the low table, letting the children trace the grooves with their fingers, their laughter mingling with the faint creak of reeds underfoot. He reflects quietly, speaking more to himself than anyone else. The city remembers what we cannot. Letters, clay, laughter, they endure, even when we do not. Somewhere along the river, the messenger rides steadily northward. Each hoofbeat carries a message of friendship, humor, and daily life, winding through villages and farms, past canals and fields, until it finally reaches Nabu Eresh. The letters are more than words. They are an extension of the people who wrote them, capturing the warmth, the absurdity, and the simple devotion of human connection. The evening settles in, bringing a gentle chill and a softening of the light. Lamps are lit in courtyards, their flickering flames reflected in the shallow pools of water scattered throughout the city. The sound of children playing quiets, replaced by the distant song of a flute and the occasional bray of a donkey returning home. Lugal Zeri and Taramu sit together, sharing the warmth of family and hearth. The clay tablet rests nearby, a silent testament to friendship, care, and the simple act of writing. It is an ordinary object, yet in its grooves lie extraordinary continuity, a dialogue spanning distance, time, and generations. As night deepens, Lugal Zeri traces the edge of the tablet once more, reflecting on how the city itself seems to listen, absorbing every letter, every laugh, every sigh. Babylon is patient, it remembers. And in this quiet, he feels the enduring pulse of life pressing softly against the walls, the streets, and the riverbanks, carrying stories into the distance, as enduring as clay. The following morning arrives with a gentle hush, the kind of stillness that presses against your eyelids and invites a slow exhale. Light spills across the rooftops of Babylon, soft and amber, making every mudbrick wall glow faintly like sun-warmed clay. The air is cool with dew, carrying the scent of river mud and the faint sweetness of figs ripening in small courtyard gardens. You trudge slowly through the narrow streets, your feet raising little clouds of dust that drift lazily behind you. Lugal Zeri is already outside, stretching as he steps into the courtyard. The tablet for Nabu Eresh has been dispatched, leaving a quiet emptiness in its place. Yet the household hums gently with life. Taramu sweeping the courtyard, children chasing each other in wide arcs around the fig tree, and a neighbor's goat attempting a daring climb onto a low wall. The air carries the constant, comforting rhythm of ordinary knife, a pulse that seems to slow and speed in waves with the movement of people and animals alike. He takes a deep breath, savoring the smell of barley porridge cooking over the low flame of the hearth, the aroma mingling with the faint tang of clay from practice tablets left drying in the sun. The city is awakening slowly, each sound layered over another, the distant bray of a donkey, the soft chatter of merchants preparing their stalls, the scrape of a potter's wheel from a nearby courtyard. Babylon feels like a living document, written not in ink or cuneiform alone, but in the everyday gestures of its people. You follow him to the market, where merchants weigh grains and oils on bronze scales, their voices soft but precise as they call out prices. Children trail behind, laughing, darting between legs like shadows. The hum of the city is constant, a quiet reassurance that life continues with or without grand events. Lugal-Zeri pauses to observe a group of scribes working on new clay tablets. Their styluses move in rhythmic precision, pressing each wedge carefully into wet clay. One young scribe, barely 10, copies a letter much like Nabu Eresh's, the tone playful and teasing, carrying the same warmth and humor. Lugal-Zeri smiles faintly, thinking of his friend reading the last tablet, likely chuckling at familiar jests. He notices a mainstream historical fact lingering in his thoughts. Babylonian scribes were trained meticulously, copying letters and contracts repeatedly until their wedge marks were uniform, legible, and sometimes even artistic. Every line carried not just information, but intention, humor, irony, and respect encoded in shapes pressed into clay. He steps closer, offering guidance to the young scribe. "Press just enough," he murmurs. "Too soft, and the words vanish. Too hard, and the clay cracks." The boy nods, concentrating with earnest devotion. A fringe fact drifts in. Some tablets discovered in ancient archives bear the faint impressions of children's fingertips, the clay smoothed and worn from repeated practice. Even mistakes, it seems, were immortalized. After a while, Lugal-Zeri moves to the riverbank, the soft lap of water against reeds providing a gentle counterpoint to the market's distant hum. He sits on a low stone wall, letting the warmth of the sun soak through his robe, and watches the small boats drifting along the current. Traders from distant cities pass by, their calls mingling with the rhythm of the river. He imagines the letter reaching Nabu Eresh, carried on one of these roads or rivers, the same landscape stretching endlessly until it finds its recipient. Taramu joins him with a cup of cooled water, and they sit in companionable silence. The children chase shadows along the riverbank, their laughter carrying over the water. Lugal-Zeri sips, feeling the cool liquid trickle down, grounding him in this ordinary, enduring moment. He murmurs, almost to himself, "Letters travel far, but the heart travels further." He returns to the courtyard later, where a basket of barley bread and dates waits. The household settles into a slow rhythm, children eating, Taramu tending to small chores, the sun sliding westward and casting long shadows. Lugal-Zeri retrieves a practice tablet, beginning to press in observations from the day. The market, the river, the quiet moments of companionship. Historians still argue whether these small personal narratives were ever intended to endure, but for him, every wedge pressed into clay carries memory, humor, and affection. As evening approaches, the city softens. Oil lamps flicker in courtyards, casting golden circles of light on stone and mud. The sounds of the day quiet to murmurs, distant footsteps, the creak of wooden shutters, the occasional bray of an animal returning home. Lugal-Zeri places a new tablet in the basket, rolling his personal seal over the surface. The impression is deep, certain, a guarantee that these words will survive,
even if the messenger never arrives.
He looks up at the sky, the first stars appearing in the deepening indigo, and feels a quiet joy. Somewhere beyond the rivers and roads, Nabu Eresh will read the words, laugh at the familiar jokes, and remember their friendship. And perhaps, one day, a distant hand will uncover these wedges, worn smooth with time, and hear the voices of long-ago friends.
The city around him is alive in a subtle, enduring way. The pulse of markets, families, and scribes weaving together in continuous rhythm. Babylon listens to all of it, absorbing letters, laughter, and small kindnesses into its memory. Lugal-Zeri sits back, closing his eyes briefly, imagining the distant reply, the messenger's journey, and the threads of connection that bind the city together. You feel it too, the gentle heartbeat of human continuity, pressed softly into clay, carried along river roads, and echoed in the quiet of everyday life. Babylon endures, as do its people, in the ordinary acts of love, friendship, and memory.
The morning arrives with a tender hush, the kind that nudges you awake rather than forcing you open your eyes. Light spills over the rooftops of Babylon, soft and golden, painting mud-brick walls with warmth and the faint glimmer of dew. The air carries a faint mixture of liver mud, crushed reeds, and the sweet fragrance of ripening dates. You follow Lugal-Zeri through the narrow streets, each step stirring up tiny clouds of dust that linger lazily in the sunbeam. He heads toward the marketplace, moving with the easy rhythm of someone who knows every curve of these lanes, every familiar face. The city is slowly coming alive. Merchants set out baskets of lentils, figs, and small clay jars of oil, their voices rising and falling in a gentle cadence, a soft music that has echoed through Babylon for generations. Children dart between carts, laughing, their feet kicking up more dust. Somewhere, a potter's wheel spins steadily, the soft thump of the foot pedal mingling with distant calls from the river docks. Lugal-Zeri pauses before a small scribe's stall, where a boy carefully copies a letter into soft, wet clay. His hands tremble slightly, concentrating on the precise angles and strokes. The letter is a copy of Nabu Eresh's last message, the humor still intact in each wedge. The boy looks up and sees Lugal-Zeri, and a shy smile breaks across his face. "I am practicing," he says quietly. "That's good," Lugal-Zeri replies. "Every line you press is a bridge to the future." He points at a wedge, demonstrating the subtle angle that gives the letter its tone. "See? A small change, but it makes the humor clearer. It shows care, and care, even in clay, travels far." You notice a mainstream historical fact as he speaks. The precision of cuneiform was essential, not only to communicate clearly, but to preserve tone and intention. The slightest variation could change meaning, yet this meticulous care allowed personal letters to survive thousands of years. He walks slowly through the market, observing neighbors. A woman arranges her basket of dates, laughing softly at a child attempting to sneak a fruit. An older man bends to adjust a scale, muttering about weight discrepancies. Lugal-Zeri nods to each of them in greeting, absorbing the rhythm of their small gestures. A fringe detail drifts into your mind. Some letters found in Babylon jokingly complained about the neighbor's cats stealing fish, a reminder that humor and everyday complaints have always existed. He moves toward the river, the water glinting under the sun's bright gaze. Traders row small boats, their calls mingling with the lapping of water against the hulls. Lugal-Zeri imagines the messenger carrying Nabu Eresh's tablet, crossing these same waters, and the thought brings a quiet smile to his lips. Letters, jokes, and small gestures of friendship, pressed into clay, riding on donkeys and boats, travel distances that humans themselves cannot. Taramu joins him with a small clay cup of date wine, the aroma sweet and heady. They sit on a low stone wall by the riverbank, watching the world unfold. Children chasing shadows, merchants haggling, the sun glinting off the water like scattered gold. Lugalzeri murmurs, "The river carries everything: news, laughter, worry, breadcrumbs, even gossip. Perhaps that is why we trust it." A scholar's phrase comes to mind. Historians still argue whether Babylon's river roads were primarily functional or social arteries. Yet here, in the soft hum of life, you can see both in action. The water does not merely transport goods, it carries conversation, friendship, and subtle acts of kindness. Back at the courtyard, the afternoon is lazy and warm. The children play near the fig tree, giggling, chasing small animals, or simply rolling along the stone floor. Lugalzeri retrieves a fresh lump of clay, ready to press new letters for practice. His stylus scratches lightly, forming precise wedges. He writes small observations, the patterns of sunlight on the walls, the rhythm of footsteps in the streets, the soft chuckles shared among friends. He rolls the family seal across the clay, pressing firmly. Each impression is a mark of permanence, a signal that these words belong not just to him, but to the household, the city, the invisible network of lives that intersect here. You sense that every small act, the letters, the laughter, the jokes, the careful gestures, is part of an enduring story, stitched together across time. Lugalzeri takes its slow descent, warming the clay streets and casting elongated shadows. Lugalzeri takes a moment to watch the workers returning home, merchants counting coins from the day, children calling out to each other across lanes. The ordinary life of Babylon, unremarkable in its singular moments, becomes extraordinary when observed as a flowing whole. By evening, oil lamps flicker to life across the courtyards. The smell of roasted barley drifts through open doors, and the soft hum of insects rises in chorus from the gardens. Lugalzeri sits with Taramu, listening to the children's laughter fade as they grow tired. The day's letter, now pressed firmly in clay, waits for the next morning's messenger, ready to journey along dusty roads, river paths, and familiar routes that link friends across distance. He leans back against the cool stone wall, tracing a finger along the grooves of an earlier tablet. Historians still argue about whether personal letters were written mainly for utility or affection. Yet here, you see both in equal measure: humor, worry, and care pressed into clay, meant to endure, meant to bridge separation. Somewhere, far to the north, Nabu Eresh will receive the message, unfolding not only words, but friendship, daily life, and subtle jokes carried across miles. And in that exchange, the pulse of human connection is made tangible, enduring, and quietly miraculous. The city settles into evening rhythm. A faint breeze stirs the palms. The children drift off to sleep, and the air cools over the rooftops. Lugalzeri closes his eyes briefly, imagining the river carrying news, the marketplace bustling, the messenger riding steadily toward his friend. Babylon listens and remembers, absorbing these small, persistent acts of life into its own long memory. The morning light creeps softly over Babylon, brushing the rooftops with pale gold. A thin haze clings to the streets, carrying the earthy scent of drying mud and the faint sweetness of crushed dates. You follow Lugalzeri as he steps into the courtyard, feeling the cool air against your skin and listening to the gentle rhythm of the city waking up. Somewhere nearby, a potter's wheel spins, soft thumps marking time, while the calls of merchants arranging their wares rise and fall like quiet waves. Lugalzeri moves deliberately toward the northern gate, where the morning messenger has already begun to gather letters. Today, a new tablet awaits dispatch, one meant for a distant friend in Kish. Its clay is smooth and warm from the sun, freshly pressed with his stylus, the words carrying both playful jokes and quiet reflections. The seal is ready, a family mark pressed deeply into the surface to ensure the recipient recognizes the sender. He hands the tablet to the messenger, offering a few quiet instructions. "Carry this safely," he murmurs, "and may the wind guide your path." The messenger nods, tucking it securely among the other letters and climbing onto his donkey. The soft shuffle of hooves begins along the road, dust rising in gentle plumes, fading slowly into the city's hum. You trace Lugalzeri's steps back into the marketplace, noting the familiar rhythms. Merchants weighing grain on bronze scales, children darting between carts, the subtle scent of oil, roasted barley, and the faint aroma of incense drifting from small temple shrines. Every gesture, every sound feels like part of a continuous tapestry of life. At a scribe's stall, young apprentices practice their writing. One boy copies a letter in Nabu Erish's playful tone, carefully forming wedges that carry the nuances of humor and respect. Lugalzeri leans close, demonstrating the subtleties of pressure and angle with his stylus. "A small change here," he says, "and the tone is preserved. Letters are bridges, not just words." A mainstream historical fact surfaces. Babylonian scribes trained meticulously to ensure clarity and tone in cuneiform, preserving not only information but emotion. A fringe thought flits through your mind. Some discovered tablets contain small doodles or marginal jokes, showing that even in ancient bureaucracy, humor persisted. Lugalzeri chuckles softly, recalling Nabu Erish's repeated jests about onion hoarding. He continues through the streets, observing neighbors in quiet communion. A woman arranges her basket of dates, glancing at children who chase each other between stalls. An older man adjusts his scales with slow precision, muttering about measurements. A boy dips his hands in wet clay, imprinting leaves for practice. Babylon hums, a network of small acts forming a living memory. By midday, Lugalzeri returns to his courtyard, settling beneath the fig tree with Taramu and the children. The air is thick with the smell of baked barley and the faint tang of river mud. He picks up a practice tablet, pressing new words into clay. Reflections on the river, the marketplace, and the gentle humor of daily life. Historians still argue whether personal letters were primarily practical or sentimental, but here they are both, carrying laughter, care, and subtle observations into the future. As the sun slides west, shadows lengthen, casting delicate patterns across the walls. Lamps flicker in courtyards, oil burning low. Lugalzeri traces his stylus lightly along the grooves of a previous tablet, imagining Nabu Erish receiving the letter, smiling at jokes, feeling the warmth of friendship pressed into clay. Outside, life continues its quiet rhythm. Merchants count coins, children play in soft arcs, donkeys trudge along sun-warmed streets. The river glimmers in fading light, reflecting the sky like scattered gold. Lugalzeri leans back against the stone wall, savoring the ordinary, enduring pulse of the city. He considers the small miracles of connection, letters traveling long roads, voices preserved in wedges, friendships maintained across distance. The city listens, absorbs, and remembers, carrying these stories forward silently, yet insistently. And somewhere along a distant road, the messenger rides steadily, tablet in hand, bridging the gap between friends with each rhythmic step of hooves on dust. The day softens into evening, and a cool breeze stirs the courtyard. Children yawn, Taramu hums a low tune, and Lugalzeri reflects quietly on the endurance of human connection, impressed upon clay and carried across time. Babylon, in its patience and constancy, becomes more than a city. It is a keeper of memory, of humor, of care, of ordinary life made eternal. The morning begins softly, with a delicate light spilling across Babylon's rooftops. Dew clings to the mudbrick walls, catching the sun and shimmering faintly like gold dust. The air carries the familiar mix of river mud, crushed reeds, and the sweet aroma of ripening dates. You trudge along the familiar lanes with Lugal-Zeri, the soft crunch of your sandals on the dust blending with distant laughter, the low bray of a donkey, and the gentle lap of water against the riverbanks.
Lugal-Zeri is tending to a fresh batch of tablets. Some are practice pieces for the children, others intended for friends and distant acquaintances. Each tablet is a small universe, words, jokes, observations, and affection pressed carefully into clay. A mainstream historical fact occurs to you as you watch him work. Babylonian letters could survive thousands of years if baked or sun-dried, preserving not just information, but personality, humor, and intention.
He begins writing a letter to a friend in Uruk, tracing each wedge slowly, deliberately. His stylus moves in measured rhythms, translating thought into enduring form. He murmurs softly, almost conversationally. Even the smallest joke, the tiniest complaint, carries weight if pressed firmly into clay. He pauses to look at the children, who are copying letters in their own uneven, earnest style. You notice the care in their hands, the same care that has preserved countless letters through millennia. A fringe thought drifts in. Some letters discovered in Babylon contained doodles of animals or playful sketches in the margins, evidence that even thousands of years ago, humor and creativity were inseparable from everyday correspondence. Lugal-Zeri smiles, recalling Nabu-Eresh's joking complaint about the neighbor hoarding onions. The marketplace hums softly in the distance, merchants weighing grains, children chasing each other, the faint creak of a wheel and the slap of oars on water. The rhythm is steady, unbroken, comforting. Historians still argue whether Babylon's social life thrived more through formal assemblies or through these casual, everyday interactions. But here, the vibrancy of life feels inseparable from ordinary gestures, whispers, and laughter. Lugal-Zeri steps outside, carrying a basket of finished tablets. He places them carefully for the morning messenger. "Carry these well," he whispers, "and let the river and road guide you." The messenger nods, tucking the tablets securely in his satchel, and rides off along the dusty lane, dust rising in lazy plumes. Somewhere along the way, Nabu-Eresh will read them, perhaps chuckle at a joke, perhaps sigh at a small complaint, but always feel the warmth of friendship preserved in clay. By midday, the courtyard is warm and golden. Taramu arranges a small meal of roasted barley and dates, their scent drifting through the air. The children play nearby, weaving in and out of shadows cast by the fig tree, occasionally stopping to trace letters on practice tablets. Lugal-Zeri joins them, demonstrating the subtle angle of a wedge, the gentle pressure that carries tone. You feel the continuity of generations here, each child learning the rhythms and humor of daily correspondence, each letter a tiny bridge across time. The afternoon drifts into evening, softening light bathing the city in warm tones. Lamps flicker to life across the courtyards, casting gentle shadows on mud-brick walls. The children grow tired, yawns soft and fleeting as the household gathers in the courtyard. Lugal-Zeri picks up a fresh tablet, pressing new observations into clay. Reflections on the river, the marketplace, the soft rhythm of daily life, and the enduring nature of friendship. Historians still argue whether ordinary letters were as influential as official decrees, but here you sense their quiet power, the ability to preserve memory, humor, and care. Somewhere along a distant road, the messenger rides steadily, tablet in hand, bridging the gap between friends with each rhythmic beat of hooves on dust. As night deepens, the air cools. Insects hum softly, the river laps quietly against its banks, and the distant flapping of shutters marks the city's transition into quietude. Lugal-Zeri leans back, tracing the grooves of an older tablet, imagining Nabu Eresh reading, laughing, remembering. Babylon listens and remembers too, absorbing each line, each small jest, each tiny reflection into its patient memory. The wind carries a gentle fragrance of baked earth and date wine. Children are asleep, lamps flicker low, and Taramu hums softly, a tune that drifts through the courtyard. Lugal-Zeri closes his eyes, imagining the countless voices pressed into clay over centuries, the letters, the jokes, the whispers, all forming a steady heartbeat beneath the city's surface. Everything slows, the air softens, and the ordinary beauty of life, the laughter, the chores, the letters pressed into clay, settles like a gentle tide. Babylon endures through the persistence of memory, the small acts of care, and the human need to communicate. The letters may be fragile in one sense, but in another, they are eternal, tiny vessels of connection across time and space. You feel the quiet joy of being part of this continuum, a witness to life pressed gently into clay, carried on roads, over rivers, across generations. And as night deepens further, you let your breathing slow, matching the rhythm of the city, the pulse of friendship, and the enduring hum of memory. Slowly, the light fades completely from the streets. The river glimmers faintly under the stars, and the last whispers of the day settle into soft quiet. Lugal-Zeri exhales, letting the serenity of the moment fill him fully. The letters, the laughter, the gentle cadence of daily life, they all linger, quiet yet insistent, preserved in the patient heart of Babylon. And with that, you realize that ordinary life, carefully observed and gently recorded, has a magic of its own, soft, enduring, and infinitely comforting. The night deepens, and the city slows its breath. Every sound softens, the faint ripple of the river, the distant hum of insects, the occasional murmur of a dog returning to its owner. Even the wind seems to tiptoe through the palm trees and fig leaves, carrying the subtle scent of baked barley and the sweetness of ripened dates. You feel your body sinking deeper into the rhythm of calm, each exhale a gentle release. Imagine, for a moment, the letters you have just witnessed being carried along dusty roads, over rivers, across cities, each wedge pressed carefully into clay. They hold jokes, gentle complaints, and the warmth of friendship, and in doing so, they carry a quiet immortality. Babylon listens to these letters, remembers them, and folds them into its long memory. Life, in its smallest gestures, endures. Slow your thoughts and allow the day to drift away. Picture the courtyards, soft oil lamplight flickering over walls, children asleep, Taramu humming quietly, and Lugal-Zeri resting by the fig tree, content and serene. Each tiny act of care, every laugh,
Every written word has its place in the gentle continuum of life. As you breathe, let the comfort of ordinary life settle around you. The river hums, the city dreams, and the letters, these enduring fragments of connection, float quietly through time. You are part of this rhythm, a witness to the soft persistence of human memory, laughter, and friendship.
Let your body sink fully, your mind soften, and your awareness drift along with the gentle pulse of Babylon, feeling the peace of enduring connection wrap around you like a soft, warm blanket. Sleep comes easily, carrying you through night as softly and as steadily as the river carries the letters of long-ago friends. Sleep dreams,